So we're going to go inside one of the Pro Football Hall of Fame voters who I believe did vote for Terrell Owens. But how come the other 47 guys in that room couldn't come together and figure out that Terrell Owens is a Hall of Famer? How about Kurt Warner? I was not a Kurt Warner vote. I would not have voted for Warner. I would not have voted for Davis either. So we'll go inside the room with Paul Domowitch, longtime pro football writer, covered the Eagles, also has the Philadelphia. Let's kind of figure that out, too. There's 48 votes, and they're kind of spread out. Paul, welcome aboard. How are you, pal?
Good. How are you?
We're doing good, and I know that a lot of people have, tried to tap into you because you were in that room to kind of have that vote. Can you explain to the listeners, there's 48 voters, correct? One that represents each NFL city and then a couple of others that make the 48. Is that how it works?
There's 16 at-large voters, including 2 former Hall of Famers, Dan Fouts and James Lofton.
So there's 48 overall, and a name will come up, and basically it is around the room. How does that kind of work?
It starts with a pool of about 110. We have 2 votes during the course of the season to reduce it to 15 modern era finalists. We go one by one. Basically, everybody that wants to have input into if they have anything to say on a candidate says it. We go through all 15 candidates, and then we have a reduction vote from 15 to 10, then another reduction vote from 10 to 5. And generally, all 5 are going to make the Hall of Fame, but we have yes-no votes on those, and they need 80% yeses to make the Hall of Fame.
All right. So if memory serves in terms of reading your stuff, you did vote for Owens, correct?
Yes.
So how does that conversation come up? I mean, is there a lot of contention here? Is it, hey, look, this guy, the quote that we had read was great career numbers, bad teammate. Is there a lot of back and forth, or is there a lot of consensus that, yeah, I agree with you, this guy doesn't deserve to get a vote?
Well, I can't tell you specifically what went on in the room because we're not supposed to do that. Mm-hmm. But basically, yeah, people are split on him. Not split. I think there's more people in his corner, but not enough to get him. Obviously, he made the final 15, but then was eliminated in that first reduction vote. There's the negative. The numbers are. The numbers are Hall of Fame numbers. That's not the question. The people that are have problems with him have problems with with what you would call disruptive behavior on the field and in the locker room, which can be considered. We can't consider character, off the field issues like drugs, domestic abuse, that sort of thing. But we can consider how a guy acts with his teammates, whether he's a cancer, that sort of thing. There's no question that Terrell has problems with some of the teams he was on, including the Eagles. It's just that his numbers are so overwhelming. My feeling is, he needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Paul Domowitch is with us from the Daily News in Philadelphia. He has a Hall of Fame vote. And so the fact you did vote for him and you feel that he should get in, and I guess a lot of the people, that is their argument, that he was a bad teammate. It's not that his numbers are not Hall of Fame worthy or that even his play, because, we just brought up Moss, Paul, and one of the things I look at, if I had to pick between Moss and Owens, I almost go Owens mainly because Moss was a first-round pick and expected to be this. Owens kind of came out of nowhere. No one expected him to be a Hall of Fame level player, and it seems that kind of gets pushed to the side too, and that him being a divisive force overshadowed everything else that he did.
Both are Hall of Fame players. There's not a question of that. I don't think it's neither or. If you're voting for them strictly on how they performed, both of them will be in the Hall of Fame.
So you do see Owens getting in at some point? They're just kind of penalizing him for a little while?
I don't know. I don't know if people will soften their attitudes on him. If he makes the final 15 again next year, which I hope, we'll have this discussion again. And hopefully the people that think he needs to be in will be a little bit more persuasive with the people that feel he doesn't belong in.
Paul Domowitch, a pro football columnist since 1982 at the Daily News, nearly 30 Super Bowls, a pro Hall of Fame selector for the last 15 years. So since it's been 15 years, Paul, that you've been in that room and a part of that process, could you tell our listeners maybe how it's changed, and has it changed for the better?
I don't think it's really changed. It's the same process, it's been for the entire time I've been in there. Open discussion, disagreements. Some people that we discuss bring out more emotional conversations than others. This year we had Tagliabue. We discussed for more than an hour and change. He did not get in. Jerry Jones was another guy we talked about for a long time, and then T.O. So. But the process itself hasn't really changed much. I know people sometimes think that people in there have agendas. I don't see that. I don't agree with a lot of the things that go on as far as people's opinions of players. I mean, I disagreed with the fact that T.O. didn't get in this year, and I disagreed with the fact that we voted in people like Morton Anderson and Terrell Davis. But that's my opinion. They have their opinion, and that's why there are 48 people in that room.
How about Brian Dawkins and the discussions that were about him? I know that he made one level of cut, and you wrote about that, but ultimately didn't make the final cut. I do think you wrote that you voted for him. What were your thoughts on Brian Dawkins in the Hall of Fame?
I think he belongs in. He redefined the safety position during his career. I mean, there are no other safeties in his generation that are as good as he is. Did what he did in Jim Johnson's defense, could do what he did in Jim Johnson's defense. I think part of the problem, I think what happened, and this is only speculation because there's no way of telling, it's a secret ballot. And, there was no negative feedback on Brian. A couple of things, safeties have been a tough sell in that room. So that's one thing. But the other, I think, was the fact that he and John Lynch both made the final 10, and I think they kind of split the vote. They canceled each other out, much like wide receivers have done in recent years. And so that's something we're going to have to get past.
Paul Domowitch with us, Pro Football Hall of Fame voter, Philadelphia Daily News. Paul, do you think, on the case of Warner and Terrell Davis, I don't think there's any doubt that those two guys were outstanding players for a very short amount of time, and specifically Davis, who had about 3 really elite seasons, and then the injuries kind of took over. Warner had 3 really good years, then he had a huge gap, about 7 years, and then he came back. Do you think that longevity has been minimized a little bit to say, look, these guys had quick bursts, but they were really elite for a quick amount of time? Has that softened a little bit, the longevity aspect of it?
Well, I think that's what put them over. Well, that's what put Davis over the top. He only had 4. He had 4 great seasons. Hall of Fame seasons, but there were only 4 of them before he got hurt. Played 3 more years, but bits and pieces of those 3 years, and wasn't. It was a shell of the player he was before he hurt his knee. I don't think he belonged in. I didn't vote for him. I just feel you need to have a little bit more than 4 years. Warner, obviously he played for a long time. My problem with Kurt, a lot of people I think that were convinced he belonged in did it on the basis of his postseason performances. But when you look at his numbers, the one statistic that jumped out at me, I'm a big touchdowns to interceptions ratio guy, and he had 3 seasons, I believe, where he had four seasons where he had a plus, better than a plus 10 touchdown to interception ratio. Donovan McNabb had 6, and Donovan McNabb will never get in that room and doesn't belong in that room. But, I just felt Warner's numbers, he didn't have enough great seasons to warrant, in my opinion, to really warrant being a Hall of Famer. But, again, other people disagreed with me.
Oh, that's interesting about McNabb, because I also noticed the touchdown to interception ratio for Warner, and a lot of people's positives for Warner were that he turned around two franchises that were not typically, glamour franchises. He took the Rams and the Cardinals in there. Are those things considered? Are those things that are fair to kind of look at and say, yeah, I'm going to lean one way because you took two down-rotten franchises and made them relevant?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly things that can be considered. It's funny. I think one thing that kind of overwhelmed people this year and maybe put him over the top was just the story itself of him. I think people just kind of were. I mean, we didn't know anything new about him. I mean, it's an incredible story. Would make a great Disney movie.
Right.
Going from box boy to Super Bowl champion, and then having your career basically look like it's over, and coming back with Arizona, and so I mean, it's a terrific story, and I think he's close to being a Hall of Famer. I just had a little bit of problem with the fact that I look at his numbers and I don't see enough great seasons there. So, but I think a lot of people were just kind of over. I think they were sold by what we just talked about, the fact that he turned around two teams, and the fact that it's just such an amazing story, kind of a feel-good story. And I'm not sure that's why you want to put a guy in the Hall of Fame, though.
Could you make that argument then for McNabb, if that's how Warner got in, that McNabb made the Eagles, they were 3-13, and then they got him to basically a 10-year run of being Super Bowl contenders every year?
Well, McNabb has to get into the final 15 before there would be any discussion, which means he'd have to advance through two basically votes, down from 100 people to 15. I don't see that happening. I mean, his numbers just are not. I told him this back when they retired his number that I just didn't feel he had Hall of Fame numbers. When he was traded to Washington, guys, I wrote at the time that he needed 2 or 3 more really good seasons, and he would have Hall of Fame numbers. And as we all know, he went to Washington, then Minnesota, and had no success at either place. I mean, his career just kind of collapsed. So, he never did. His numbers just never got him over the top, in my opinion.
We're spending a few minutes with Paul Domowitch. So, Paul, do you think then, moving forward, things get tougher for Brian Dawkins? Because Mike and I have talked about some of the names that are coming down the pipeline. Ray Lewis jumps to my mind immediately, but some of the names that are coming down the pipeline.
Ed Reed and Palomalu. Does
it get harder for Doc then moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, this was an ideal year for him, I felt, because of the fact that the only slam dunk out of the first-year candidates was LaDainian Tomlinson. So that kind of left 4 spots open. That won't be the case next year because Ray Lewis will almost be an automatic. There's, Urlacher's on the ballot next year, Randy Moss. So it's going to be, and you mentioned the safeties that are coming up. Although, again, Ed Reed was basically he was a center fielder. I mean, he didn't, again, another guy that just did not do the things that Dawkins did at safety. I mean, Ed Reed never played up in the box, never covered wide receivers on the outside, never was the, Brian Dawkins may have been the best blitzing safety in the history of the game. There's things that you look at and you just say there's no comparison here. But what Ed Reed has is a pretty impressive interception number, and that'll carry some clout. But it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But I'm hoping that a lot of people after the meeting told me they really thought that Dawkins, they really are convinced Dawkins is a Hall of Famer, and I'm hoping that carries over to next year when we talk again and they realize, John Lynch was in his 4th year as a finalist, and I think that's why some people voted for him, kind of like feeling it was sort of, you shouldn't consider how long the guy's waited, but I think voters do.
Yeah.
And so I think he got some votes over Dawkins on that fact, and it hurt Brian. So maybe in Brian's 2nd year, it'll actually benefit him that he's not a first-time eligible guy.
Huh. You mentioned that Tomlinson, and I agree, was a slam dunk. But Do you also feel that way about Owens, that he is a slam dunk? I mean, like, it just sounds like if I were to pick this class, Owens would be the first guy I vote for.
Well, I felt that way last year. I mean, he is second in career receiving yards, third in career receiving touchdowns. That's two of the three basic major categories that you use to consider pass catchers. And you're talking about, that alone. That just right there, it should be, you should put him in the Hall of Fame. So, yeah, I think he should be a slam dunk.
Were there other guys that you fought for or that you voted for that did not make the list?
Well, there were some offensive linemen that I thought deserved more consideration. I think one of the problems there was the same problem Lynch and Dawkins had, the splitting of the vote, because we had, I think, 4 offensive linemen in the room: Kevin Maue, Tony Baselli, Joe Jacoby, and I'm missing one. Alan Faneca. Alan Faneca. I'm dumbfounded on Faneca. I thought he was going to be a slam dunk last year, and in both years he's gone out on the first reduction vote. In my mind, he was one of the best guards, of his generation. But next year we've got Steve Hutchinson coming in to the room, the Seattle guard. So that's going to hurt him. So it's just so hard to figure out what's going on in people's minds.
Yeah.
You just hope to make, you try to make the best argument for people. And, anytime you get subjective opinions, things are going to be a little flawed. There's no perfect system to do this.
No doubt. But
I know people.
I guess some of the listeners or people who have been kind of following our conversation, how does say, okay, Morton Anderson, not to say he's not deserving, but does he take votes away from an Isaac Bruce or an Alan Faneca? Like, okay, I'm going to vote for Morton Anderson, a kicker, over one of these guys. How does that work where a kicker ends up getting in over somebody that maybe is a little bit more high profile?
Yeah, he absolutely takes votes away. One of the reasons when Brian made when Dawkins made the cut down to 10, I looked at the list of 10 people that were still alive, and I thought Brian had a real good chance of making it at that point because of the fact that you had Morton Anderson, who last year didn't even make the final 10, and as near as I can tell, did not make any kicks since then. You had, it just wasn't there were a lot of guys. Davis was there on that list. Kevin Maue was still alive, who, while I think may belong in there. It just was not there. There wasn't anybody there that you could definitely see going the next step. Kurt Warner. So I thought Brian could slide in there. Then we get spots taken by Anderson and Davis. The Anderson one was the most mystifying, obviously. As I wrote in today's paper, he played 24 years. Like, granted, the longevity was terrific. And he's the leading scorer in NFL history right now, which you would expect from a kicker that's played 24 years. But if I'm going to put a kicker in, I want a kicker in there that's got probably is near the top in accuracy. Morton Anderson, despite playing in a dome almost his entire career, is like 51st in field goal accuracy. A lot of people kind of mentioned that how strong his leg was, and the teams he was on, New Orleans and Atlanta and Minnesota, used him, for long kicks. Well, David Akers has a better 50-plus field goal percentage career-wise than Morton Anderson. So, and nobody's ever going to suggest that David Akers belongs in the Hall of Fame. So I don't know. You can't explain why people do what they do. I think the fact, there was some strong, passionate discussion about him and the fact that he leads the league in scoring career-wise, and how can we keep this kind of guy out? And we haven't put a kicker in 25 years or whatever. But he didn't get my vote. He obviously got a lot of other votes. So that's,
So far, I've been on base with about all your votes, Paul. I so far, I've been right up. You and I are on the same wavelength. I like that.
Paul, what about Jerry Jones? What about Jerry Jones? What was the main distinction for Jerry Jones?
Well, he's voted on separately, so it doesn't cost any of the modern era players a place in Canton. So that's certainly a consideration. They're basically nominated by a separate committee. I mean, it's by the people in the room, but some of them are on. There's I think 8 or 9 on Jerry got in as a contributor, and that's only a 2-year-old, 3-year-old category. Before, contributors had to go in against players. Ed Sable, the founder of NFL Films, actually got into the Hall of Fame in 2011 not as a contributor, but because there wasn't that category, he was a contributor, but he had to beat out players for it. This year, Paul Tagliabue and Jerry Jones were the contributor nominees by the committee, but all they needed to do was get 80% of a yes or no vote. They didn't have to go through the reduction process like the 15 finalists. As far as why he got in, I mean, I voted for him. I personally, going into the room, I felt they should have, and I was in disagreement with the committee for nominating him this year. I thought, what's the rush here? Wait 5 years? I mean, the man did a lot for the league. I mean, it didn't so much have to do with the 3 championships that the Cowboys won in the 90s because, I mean, Jimmy Johnson had a little something to do with that too. Not the 3rd one. He was gone by then. But Jerry's had a lot to do with their success in television as far as the broadcasting revenue and a lot of other ways where he's made the league money. It's an uneasy feeling to put a guy in the Hall of Fame because he's helped make rich people richer, but that's kind of sometimes what you do. So I since he wasn't taking up a spot by anybody else, I wish they would have waited 5 years to nominate him. But if I was going to vote for him in 5 years, I kind of felt, well, I got to vote for him this year.
Well, I like that way of thinking, though. I do like that. I can appreciate that. Away. Yeah, but I can appreciate him saying, if you're a Hall of Famer 5 years from now, you're one today. That's a rational thinking there.
Spending a few minutes with Paul Domowitch. So, Paul, you are a Hall of Fame voter. Historically, the voters do not put 2 players in from the same position in a class. Now, this year, though, 2 running backs. Why do you think that happened?
I think it was just happenstance. I mean, like the way we vote, I mean, it's not like you consciously say, well, we're going to put 2 of these in. I mean, usually, as I was saying with Lynch and Dawkins and the wide receivers in the past, usually what happens is the vote ends up getting split. I think Tomlinson was going to get in regardless. I think it wasn't a matter of I don't think there was an opportunity. I think he was such an if I don't know what the vote looked like, but I would imagine Tomlinson was just such an overwhelming factor that Davis had no impact on him or vice versa. But what happened was a lot of people changed their mind on Davis. I mean, Davis made the final 5 or final 10 last year. A lot of people, I mean, basically what we discussed on Davis for a lot of the time was, did he play long enough? Nobody questioned his how he played in those 4 years. Or, one thing I think that probably sold a lot of people was a comment by John Elway, who basically said those 2 Super Bowl championships by the Broncos, he was the guy, not Elway. I mean, it's Elway saying that, and that it was, without Terrell Davis, they don't win those, and he's probably right. But again, in my mind, it just came down to the only 4 years, whereas other people obviously were able to get past that.
Just a real enjoyable visit here with Paul Domowitch. And Paul, you said the word secret ballot and secrecy as you talk about the voting process. So I will ask you, should the Pro Football Hall of Fame voters have to make their votes public? Are you okay with the current system as constructed, or should they be made public?
Well, I mean, I think the Hall of Fame itself should make them public. they won't do that. That we've asked them to, or at least some of us have asked them to. They, for whatever reason, feel uneasy about it. So that leaves it on the individual voters to do it themselves if they choose to. I've done it every year. It's in today's paper. Some others have, the large majority haven't. I don't, I've never asked them to do it or asked them why they don't. So I'm not sure why they would have reservations if they feel it's just not any, But I mean, we get enough criticism for what goes on in that room. I want people to at least know how I voted, whether they agree or disagree with it.
You'd be one of the people that wouldn't be getting yelled at, it seems like today, from a lot of people who say, look, if you didn't vote for Owens, then, you're holding a grudge or, you don't know the game, really. I mean, you mentioned his stats and anything. I mean, to not vote for him, it seems that you're holding a grudge or something. Just doesn't seem right there. He seems to be the one guy. We'll see what happens for Terrell next year. Hey, it's always a great debate and a great weekend. And the Hall of Fame weekend comes up in August. Paul Domowitch, one of the Pro Football Hall of Fame voters, longtime NFL writer for the Philadelphia Daily News. Domo, always a pleasure, pal.
Thanks for having me, guys.